Okay, this is real basic to test your power trim and tilt motor. Now I'm monkeying around with it. I don't have my trim and tilts not working, but I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm starting at the basics. I actually ended up, and believe it or not, in order to take this whole thing off of here, I believe last time I took the bolts out and had to loosen this guy up, separate this whole thing out so I can get to these guys. Well, today all I did was this is an 8mm or 5/16. I actually took the cap off, pulled the bolts, pulled the armature and everything out. Of course, when you do that, the brushes and the commutators in there, the brushes and the springs are in there, so they fall out. But I was able to take that out, clean the commutator up, take the armature, and if you're familiar with threading, putting brushes back in, putting motors back together, you can take the spring and push it inside there, get the brush, push it in there, hold it with your one finger, get the other spring on the other side, get that brush in there, and you take the armature and the commutator and you actually kind of weave it on up in there, pushing the springs out of the way until you get it. You can actually put the cap armature in the cap. Then there's an O-ring in here. Put that in there, then you slide this sucker housing back over it. There's a little washer on the end of the shaft you got to be careful of in there. When you pull this out, mind you, fluid spills out of there because it's direct into the pump. This, of course, runs the pump. I was able to actually take that and put it back together, which I thought about trying to film that, but I'd have to have a tripod, and I got to admit, I was pretty impressed. Anyway, so I did that and cleaned it up, and I'm trying to make sure everything works hunky-dory here. So I'm having wiring issues. So in order to test it, however, if you just want to test your power trim and tilt, you find the plug, which is this one. It'll be the wires coming out of the side. Follow it up inside the cowling up in here, and you will find a plug that looks like this. This plugs into a plug coming out of your trim and tilt box. So these points have 12 volts. That has 12 volts. These are connected. What I ended up finding also, my connections were corroded. There's a ground wire behind here. I took all these loose, sanded them up, got my connections all cleared up. Same thing with this terminal strip over here. I was getting 12 volts at this wire, this little pink wire that comes around and goes back up into here, but nothing. 1 volt up in here, or my 1 volt up in there. Ended up having to cut the terminal off it to get continuity. And then I got continuity, and then I got my 12 volts. I pulled all these off to clean them. So I got all new clean. You'll see where the two wires go together. They need to make sure both sides where the contact, where they make contact, is clean. It's the most important thing on those. And here, where the wires go together, you need to make sure they contact. These little straps here connected to, where are you? Clean all the contacts where the wires go together. The ones that have the straps, you need to make sure the wire terminals are clean on the back side too, because these connect together. So you want to make sure everything's nice and clean. And just say, pull this bolt out. God, I'm not looking. Pay attention. Pull this bolt out on the back side. There's a ground strap, ground wire. Clean the surface of the engine, because this is a mount for the engine. Don't worry about that, that's rubber mounted. Alright, what did I do? Okay, so I got 12 volts here. What you want to do, test the way the motors work. They basically reverse the voltage. So on one side, if you got 12 volts going to one side and ground on the other, the motor runs one way. You flip them around, it runs the other way. Let's see, is that grounded enough in there? Let's see, I got ground wire jumpers attached to this bolt up here, which is a good ground. I tested the ground. Now I got 12 volts. I confirmed I got 12 volts. Be careful when you hook anything to 12 volts. You have the jumper, now you got 12 volts. So that's 12 volts. This is 12 volts. If that's pushed up in there right. See if I can get in there without shorting out. Okay, there's the motor running one way. Take my ground. I think this is basically a new trim and tilt motor I put in. Well, I say new, relatively new, within the last few years. This boat's old, and then you can tie the other one. If you can get it to it, ground it. That has to be grounded. This is tricky. Okay. Hopefully I won't short those out. This one-handed thing is always tricky. I don't have a good connection somewhere. Anyway, my trim and tilt works both directions. Yeah, hold on. It's sticking me off. Hope that's in the right direction. It worked a second ago. Trust me. Anyway. Come on. Now what's going on? Murphy. Swell. Try it the other direction again. Okay, now I got nothing. I got no power. Alright, something's I lost my 12 volt somehow. Okay, well, I lost my voltage. I blew my little fuse that's in here. It's an AGA 20, just a little tiny bus fuse. But for whatever reason, it didn't like being touched like that. But that's basically what you do. If you don't want to use that power, you might want to just hook it to directly to the battery or something. But that's the basics. You run 12 volts to one side, ground the other side, and just flip it, flop it, and your trim motor should run both ways if it's working. And mine was working until I just blew this fuse. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, and then I'll go figure out if I got one of these fuses stashed somewhere. And keep moving on my issue.